Hello everyone, Adam here, and today Sony and Naughty Dog released the next part in The Last of Us Part 2 documentary series. This one is called Inside the World. We already explored the narrative and the characters, so now we are going to explore the world, and let's see if this trailer offers anything substantial. I mean, the other trailers, they offered small snippets of new information, but most of them have been very limited of what they've revealed, especially considering all those leaks which Sony and Naughty Dog have confirmed haven't impacted pre-orders. Which I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how well the game sells. I mean, I'm still excited. I pre-ordered it and everything. So let's see and get started. Right here.
The world of Last of Us is dangerous. Unless you're living.
Let's go back to that. That is, wow. I'm replaying the Last of Us Remastered. I already did it on live stream. I'm doing it again on Survivor difficulty. But this, wow, that is so much cooler. I mean, look at that design. I mean, the clickers looked already they just looked very sickening. But here, dear God, they took it up a notch.
Unless you're
They look like literal trees. I mean, look at that. That is sick and awesome.
living in a protected area, there's something lethal around every corner. Once you venture out of your home, you're in danger. And where we're taking the story and where we're taking Ellie is like each step of the way, she's putting herself in more and more danger to bring these people to justice.
That's true.
I would say that the world,
danger
in every sense of the word, is bigger than Last of Us Part 1. Both in scale and the amount of physical space that exists for you to explore, for you to encounter other people.
Yeah, this route has its perks. Our hope is to make every corner a challenge, make every decision hard for Ellie. And so we do that not just in the gameplay you experience, but also in the level design. So part of that is making certain experiences really hostile, be it through weather or through rivers or craggy cliffs or slick snow. But we also use it in terms of how blind the player is. Like, what can they see? How safe do you feel? Can you see a threat coming around the corner? You never know if the bullets in your gun are going to be enough. You never know if you can stop and bandage your arm.
Actually, you can know a lot of that stuff. Just, predict how much damage, how many bullets it takes to take down an enemy, how fast your bandages go. A lot of that you can time. I mean, unless they're going down the Resident Evil 2 and 3, the recent games route. In those games, I had a major issue with how damage was allocated. Like, sometimes you would take 1 bullet to kill a zombie. Sometimes you would take 5. It was a little annoying. I understand why they did it. That inconsistent damage meant that you had to be very alert of all your supplies, and it made running and evading much more. It just made it a lot more attractive than just killing everything. So maybe they're going down that route. I never know.
Never fully breathe. And we want you to be in alignment with Ellie, who can never fully breathe when she experiences.
Whoa, that's a runner, and it has a bow and arrow.
This trauma.
Like, look at that. So this is a recently turned infected.
For Jackson specifically, we wanted to make it feel like a very close-knit kind of community that's
like
focused on family, focused on sustainable ways of living. I obviously have the hydroelectric dam generator that's powering the town, so we have, electricity in Jackson, which is not something that maybe players would expect to see in the world.
What are you talking about? That was the major point in the first game. One of the major story arcs was getting that dam working when you first meet Tommy in The Last of Us Part 1. So, what do you mean by players won't be expecting that? It would probably been more prudent if you said most of the world doesn't have this delicate resource, because it is delicate and extremely valuable, because one wrong move and you lose that entire dam. But yeah, not really that shocking.
But given that we're further in time, we wanted to show that there are certain people dedicated in the world to rebuilding a life that doesn't revolve around killing people and scavenging.
As you walk around the town, you can hear kids laughing. You could see people going into restaurants and eating, and it's a very kind of tranquil town. Now, we know there's all these horrible things happening outside the walls, but they've been able to protect the innocence of this town.
Jackson, in many ways, represents what is at stake for our characters, a life of peace and relative comfort, a life where you can fall in love, a place where children can play and it's okay. And
that also makes you a big target, and anyone who is familiar with survival games like this, post-apocalyptic games, towns like that are usually the primary target for large bandits for, you know, sensible reasons. They have lots of resources and they want them, but we'll see if that becomes a plot point in The Last of Us Part 2, because it seems like that might be an issue.
I think, you know, when we were looking at building out Jackson, it's like, okay, how many of those moments can we represent? What's awesome about the world of The Last of Us is it shows just how precious the things that we take for granted in our everyday lives, how precious those things really are.
So Joel did eventually teach Ellie how to play the guitar. I mean, that was already expected, but that was, where is it? Let's go a little back. Yeah, this is, I'm going to assume right after the first game, because he made it very clear he wanted to teach her to play the guitar and, you know, get back his family that he lost in the initial infection. We already saw this. This is all familiar.
Seattle, compared to Jackson, is very different. It's more of a war zone, I would say.
Part of the interesting thing with Seattle or the Pacific Northwest is that there's all this rain and all this foliage and wildlife, and it's this very lush area that if someone were to settle down, it'd be a pretty good place to settle down, just as far as the kind of fruit you can scavenge, the animals you can hunt. And then because it is so lush, because it is so teeming with resources, is why there are multiple factions trying to fight over those resources.
There are two factions.
One faction you run into in Seattle is the Washington Liberation Front. When the outbreak happened, the military took some pretty drastic actions and quarantined parts of the country.
We saw that in The Last of Us Part 1. One of the first scenes that you see is the military not only limited amount of rations they're given to the people, but also executing people who show any signs of infection. They literally get all these people who were inside this quarantine building, and the second this woman shows signs of infection, they immediately inject her. I don't know what it is, but it's something that literally just kills her within seconds. So Drunkman is right that they took extreme measures, the military. We also saw from Ellie's perspective, when you play the DLC Left Behind and it opens up, she's inside this very lavish room. It's clean. She's got fresh sheets. It's like so immaculate in comparison to the room that Joel wakes up in, that you could see the contrast. You also learn from Ellie when you go into, I forgot the town, I think it's Pittsburgh. I'm not really sure. But when you go inside Pittsburgh and the hunters are chasing you and you see the military academy, she says, well, not only the military academy, boarding school, but also when you're outside the quarantine gate, she's like, it never happened in Boston that they ran out of food, but Joel was like, yes, they did. That's because they kept giving supplies to the military. They kept it for themselves, and they would give it to their new recruits. So Ellie was unaware that food shortages were constantly happening because they would keep it away from the civilians and hoard excess amounts of resources for themselves. So yeah, just a little like summary of how bad the military was. And since there was no central government, no one really was questioning them. I mean, who's going to question them? It's not like you can go to the United States federal government and complain, hey, the military during this world apocalypse is not treating us right.
And this was their way of protecting the population that has survived this horrendous outbreak. And because of that, it led to rise of these resistance groups. And in the first game, we saw the Fireflies. And we heard about other groups, and in this game we get to see, here's another group that rose called the Washington Liberation Front that was able to defeat the army and thereby take over a lot of their equipment. And they're this very militaristic faction.
And at the same time, you have the Seraphites. And they're a religious group that also came up out of the outbreak that believed that the pandemic came because of sin. They're trying to reset the world. and return it to a better place than it was.
Are you kidding me? That's like the most idiotic thing. I know there are factions like that in every post-apocalyptic world. Like in Days Gone, they had I forgot what they call the Freaker worshippers. I'm not really sure, but yeah, they had Freaker worshippers who believed that they were like they were supposed to be worshipped, and they would like shave their skin and burn it off and just try to resemble that of the Freakers. They would act like the Freakers, but seriously, the Seraphites, that's their entire motto, to reset the world. And what? This wasn't done by sin. This was nature. Nature basically just said nature just decided F you, humanity, and they just jumped the species gap with the fungal infection cordyceps. This has nothing. Oh my god. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little annoyed by that direction, because it's just so cliche and overdone, but whatever.
In The Last of Us, almost any group that has survived this long has to be dangerous. If you're not dangerous, you're not going to survive. You're going to become someone's victim. And the two factions you run into are both very dangerous. The WLF has a lot of military equipment that they're able to use to defend this area, and they have large numbers, whereas the Seraphites are very quiet and stealthy and able to use the large amount of foliage to their advantage, and they fight more in this kind of guerrilla warfare.
I like how he said they're really sneaky and stealthy, and that guy's literally holding up a torch while he's in the open. And I mean, there's nothing more stealthy than holding up a bright object while you're in the middle of an open, like a little, well, you're on a little stoop. It's just like you're on elevated ground and you're holding a torch. You're basically exposed. But yeah, that's a warning.
You deal with them is going to be different because they have different language, different communication style. The scars will whistle to each other with this different language. And they have some of the stuff that you have. You have a bow and arrow, they can hit you with arrows and impale you, and you have to pull the arrow out. They have big sledgehammers and melee weapons.
So now you have to pull out arrows? Oh, that's going to be annoying as hell. It's probably going to do like damage over time or limit your movement if you don't pull it out.
The WLF, they have trained dogs that will sniff and attack you.
Dogs are a new level of threat that Ellie hasn't had to negotiate before, and hopefully they create a new complicated choice for the player.
Dogs were actually part of The Last of Us 1, but yeah, they were never used in gameplay. You would see a set of dogs when you were entering the slums in the first game, and I believe one more time, you saw them in the opening area, the suburb area, after you got out of the the community that Ish started in the sewers. After you get out of the sewers and you go to the suburbs, you see a bunch of wild dogs who just go off screen. So now they're actually in combat, which I really like and hate at the same time, because in the last video, we saw that they actually do cry and whimper when you kill them. In other games, it's not that realistic, and I'm okay with it because it's so fake. But in here, they kind of made it a little too real, and it makes me very uncomfortable, to the point that I probably don't want to even kill the dogs, because I love dogs, and it's just like, it's very uncomfortable.
We saw in them an opportunity to challenge people's perceptions of what a combat setup can be. We wanted to find really hard choices. The dogs themselves have names. They're called out by their owners. We wanted every setup to be challenging.
Oh, that smell. Looks like infected did this. How many do you think it would take to bring down a moose?
Infected are still a threat in this world. We wanted to take first our basic classes that we had in the first game and say, okay, what's different about them now? So we'll have scenarios where way more runners, like we can have hordes sometimes of runners coming after you, and it might be about just escaping because the odds are just overwhelming. You know, this thing.
So it's like Days Gone, the cordyceps, the runner horde is going to come after you, and then Ben Studio is going to be like, are we a joke to you? And then the Freako horde is going to charge them.
Just keeps mutating. There's certain evolutions of infected that you haven't seen before, certain new classes.
There's the Shamblers, which kind of have these exploding acid clouds when you get near them.
You're running down a hallway and you have to suddenly make a decision like, oh, do I want to take the damage and go through this cloud? or find some other route or go back the way I came. And it kind of forces you to, on the fly, kind of make new decisions about how you're going to deal with the threat behind you or potentially in front of you.
So again, it's about how do we make fighting against infected intelligent. So when you come on a space, you're listening to audio cues because different classes will make different sounds. If you just go in guns blazing and throw caution in the wind, you could easily get overwhelmed and regret that
Never
strategy.
do that.
That level of uncertainty and instability is something our characters have to carry with them every day as they go out into the world to protect the people they love most. And that threat is banging on their door every day.
I really hope you make it.
That's the end of the video. So there is actually a 6th type of infected that Neil Druckmann did confirm. It's supposed to be the 6th stage of evolution. I know it's runners, stalkers, clickers, then it becomes bloaters. I believe that's correct. The shamblers are actually an evolutionary subcategory of the bloaters. So that's 5th, and there's supposed to be a 6th one. I assume the 6th one's going to be some sort of, I guess, multi-tank. Like maybe the infected fuse together into a huge hybrid form. That would be both disgusting and awesome. But either way, another great video. We learned some new information about the world, including what Ellie is fighting for and the insights of Jacksonville. Some small information about the Washington Liberation Front and the Seraphites. The Seraphites sound very, very cliche, and I am a bit annoyed by their entire doctrine because, from my perspective, it sounds truly idiotic because that's just so stupid. Oh, it was it fascinates me. I understand that people might think that way if they were in this type of world, like they would lean towards religion because, you know, you're in this situation, you're trying to make sense of the horrible things that are around you. Yeah, a lot of people turn to religion for that type of situation. So I can understand that, but it just sounds so idiotic when I think about it. Oh, we need to cleanse the world, we need to do that. Earth will survive. Humanity will fall, but Earth will survive. Like, everything else will live. It's just humanity that will fall. I don't know, it just seems a little too much of a cliche. Anyway, that's the video. Please check out my other content. I just did a bunch of videos for Minecraft Dungeons. I did a new video on Ubisoft with Trackmania. It's something that I'm a little frightened about, that if other publishers start doing, check out that video. And I also have a couple of more videos for The Last of Us Part 1. I am going to upload a walkthrough. My other one got taken down because of copyright claims and, you know, that stuff. So I have to do it again and, you know, make some changes. Anyway, that's the video. And like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Oh yeah, one last thing. Like. And there we go.